Yeah, g'day guys. Last summer I was doing a bit of casting and my mate Luke contacted me to ask whether I'd be able to cast a couple of frames for him. So I asked him to draw up a pattern with draft angles and stuff, and this is what he came up with. He sent me the STL files. Now this was all last summer that I actually cast these and sent them down to Luke, but I was short of material for a video this week, so now you get to see it. Well, I've now got the two halves of this pattern ready, sort of. I didn't do a video time-lapse of the printer because, well, the printer was driving me nuts. I had a whole bunch of failures. Remember, this was last year before I got my nice Bamboo Labs X1 carbon printer. Big flat models like this with large surface area are pretty challenging for bed adhesion. Man, I must have tried printing this at least 20 times, constantly changing different settings. I had issues with bed leveling, my Z height sensor was knocked out of calibration, and at the same time I also had to play around and fixed my under extrusion issue. At least I hope I have. This seems to be a bit better closed and sealed than some of my earlier prints. I still don't have perfect adhesion on this one, but I managed to get two that I'll be able to use. My logo and Luke's logo on it. I'm just going to need to bog up that corner which dropped off a little. That won't make a difference in the final casting. Once I had that corner bogged up, I continued smearing a bit of bog around just to also help with the layer lines. Right, bit of sanding and that corner's now looking okay. I'm nearly ready to undercoat this, but let's just glue in the dowel pins first. I think My Food Boy undercoats 3D printed patterns by first using some latex based sort of house paint. It's the sort of stuff you put on interior walls, and I've got some in some pretty foul colours, so that'll be perfect. Need enough paint to fill in all the striations, but not so much as to kill the detail on the tellyfish. These have now dried overnight. Just cut that paint back a bit. It's more a filler and undercoat than anything. It does do a nice job of filling in the striations. Okay, with those now sanded back a bit smoother, they get a final coat with rattle can. Hopefully get a nice smooth finish. Hey, you guys watching the Louis Vuitton Cup? It's cool that they're broadcasting each race live on YouTube. And while I hope Team New Zealand wins this year's America's Cup in October, I really think that Luna Rossa Prada is the most awesome looking boat. Very futuristic. I'd also recommend you check out the YouTube channel Mozzie Sails. These guys' analysis and engineering is just brilliant. I'm going to need a casting flask for them. And I've got a couple of nice new ones that I made up a while ago, but unfortunately this one's way too small and this one's also too small. Especially with iron, you'd need more sand around the outside than that. So let's make a new one. The wood I'll use is this. It's finest mystery wood from an old pallet. Good enough for this, it's just going to get burnt up over time. I'll just put some little grooves in it to grip the sand. Because it's so easy to do on the saw, I'll just widen those slots a little more. Next up is to rip it into two pieces. A little test cut to make sure I've got it in the middle, 19.3. So I need to move it over a wee bit. You know what I didn't think through? I need 8 pieces, not 4. But I can get 2 more off my off cap. Luckily I had another old board from that pallet. Right, next up I'll just set up a stop block so that I can cut a rabbet in all of these to the same depth. I just put some tape on the edges of this first part so I can build up the second one and glue it without the glue sticking them together. I'm just going to borrow the guide pins off this one for now. Mail time. It used to be difficult and expensive to get commercial companies to sell you a Crucible, but now Amazon stocks them, so I'll leave a link below. I noticed that my Crucible for iron was getting pretty thin. They don't last that long at iron temperatures. Cool. This one's a little bit smaller, I think. It's an A9 instead of an A10, but hey, I don't fill it to the brim anyway. I visited this very strange building which has the workshop of the Austrian aviation museum in it. This was built in World War II for the production of the Messerschmitt fighters, and this is where they set up the cannons. So it's basically a shooting range for aircraft cannons to allow them to adjust like wherever they shoot at. So it's this long skinny concrete building with a sand wall at the far end of it. It's located on the secure area of Flambee Airport, so if you want to see the museum, I guess you have to telephone in advance to make an appointment to see it. We start the preheat on gas. We've got a police helicopter flying around the whole time. They're not after me, I don't think. Next up, I need to condition my sand. Now between the furnace, the police helicopter, and the neighbour doing some gardening, I think I'm just going to do voiceover from here on in. I do a squeeze test to work out whether the sand's got the right moisture content. Here it's still a bit too dry and crumbles too easily. I just use normal talcum powder as my parting powder. Knowing where to put things like risers, ingates, shrink bobs, that's the experience that a real foundryman would have, which I don't really have, so I just kind of guess at it. Here I'm sifting the sand that goes in direct contact with the pattern. It just helps cut down on casting flaws. The weird chugging sound you can hear is the muller in the background preparing some more sand, not me ramming it. Editing the video now, I can see that the sand was actually a bit too dry. I should have mulled it with more water. Anyway, not being one to let signs of failure get in the way, I continued ramming this up and struck it off. It's really helpful to have a hole in your moulding bench so that you can just dump all the sand down the middle. I'm using a small tapered sprue so it can go in now. The pouring basin just gets kind of carved into the top of the sand. It was about now, when I started carving the runners and ingates and stuff, that I finally accepted that this sand is just too dry. So I can dump that mould out into the muller, add a bit more water, and start again from scratch. So here you can see the mould making process from a different, hopefully better angle. It's important to take the time to blow out any loose sand, because otherwise it makes defects. Now the furnace is heated to cherry red on gas, it's time to switch over to used vegetable oil. My homemade needle valve's not the most sensitive thing in the world, so I get a few little puffs before it actually settles down to a decent burn. Now on this first pour, look at the consistency of the iron, and here goes chunky bits. Oh, that's never good. But not being one to let obvious signs of failure get in the way of my optimism, let's pour the second mould with the same iron. Not much iron going down the hole, and lots of iron sitting on top of the mould is also not really a good sign. It takes iron ages to cool down enough to be able to break out the mould. If you do it too fast, you end up chilling the iron, making it go really hard. Right, they've now been cooling for a few hours. Shake them out. Well, that one's a fail. That cast short. Nope. Same again. Okay, so what can I learn from these failed castings? This is the first one. This bottom part of this pattern is a very thick section, then the slightly thinner sections, and then at the top there's supposed to be like a bit with the logo on it, which is the thinnest of all. So the idea would be the thinnest section is furthest away from the mold, it will freeze first, and then the slightly thicker sections will freeze, and then these thick sections through here would be the last to freeze, and they would cause shrink defects. So I wanted these big shrink bobs to feed this section so that I wouldn't get shrink defects in the casting. The basic problem is the metal was too cold. The second issue was that I made these connections to the shrink bobs far too small. That's not enough to feed the casting as it freezes. I saw while pouring there were some chunks in it, so I didn't get my metal that clean. The shrink bobs were in the drag, which is the bottom. It may well be that I got some inclusion in each of these runners, which then closed them off. So let's look at the second casting. I put the shrink bobs in the cope, which is the top of the mould. And as you can see, once again, I think I made my runners through into the pattern too small. I'm guessing once again my too small runners got clogged. So the two major things I need to do when I redo this casting is, I think I'll keep the shrink bobs in the rag, in the bottom part. I'll put the shrink bob much closer to the actual pattern, so there's only a small gap there. And then I'll make that gate much larger so that it can feed really easily. You can see from the fracture surface that I've got nice grey cast iron, so no worries with chills on a section that thick. Doing iron castings is a huge amount of work, so it was a few days later that I got a second shot at it. You can see some sparks coming off the melt. That's a really good sign that it got the heat right. Don't worry about that aluminium foil, that was just there to stop any leaves or anything falling into the mould while I was preparing the melt. It just floats on top. After pouring the first mould, I put the crucible back in the furnace, superheated it a bit more and added a bit more metal. Now lots of sparks are coming off, that's great. Look how nice and fluid this melt is, and also you don't see any chunks going down there, so I think I skimmed it a lot better. This looks like good iron. Alright. Right, let's shake out the first one. Oh, that looks better. Well, you can see that I made this flask a bit too small for iron, maybe a bit over 1 inch in each direction. You probably need 2 inches, otherwise the heat burns up the flask. But hey, doesn't matter, did its job. That'll still work for a while longer. Now let's shake out the second one. If I had a mould wash of graphite and put that on the surface of the sand before I closed the mould, I wouldn't have quite as much sand sticking here and would have got a better surface finish. Here you can see where I ended up putting that shrink bob. Well, the iron where I cut looks lovely, nice and solid, no inclusions. I hope it's the same on the other side. Okay, there's a bit of shrinkage here. This iron files really nicely, nice and soft with no chills. Well, I must say I'm very happy with how those castings came out. From my inspection, I can't see any obvious inclusions or defects at the surface. That's a bit of oil on there. The markers logos came out really nicely. Just a couple of layers of 3D print, but yeah, it just looks really cool. So each of these is 4.2 kilograms. I'll get them boxed up and sent off so Luke can do what he wants with them. Yeah, no pressure, Luke, but please take lots of video as you machine these and I'll help you make a video out of it because I think everyone will be interested to see what the result looks like. Thanks a lot for watching.